Okay, we are recording.
Oh my God, you guys are fools. Alright, so 2s, 4s, and 8s. Let's go around, let's talk about how it's going, and then figure out where we're going from there. Do we need to slow down? Who's having trouble with how to teach it? All that junk.
Okay.
So where are we at?
I have an exercise right here that I gave my students, and I said if 2 times 5 equals 10, then 4 times 5 equals what?
Okay, so what were you trying to, I know the answer. What were you trying to attack with that question? Good.
When
So that the 2s,
4s, it's doubled.
good. Which is the pattern that we wanted them to see the last couple of weeks.
Yes. So some of them were able to say it's doubled, but
Good luck.
because I did 5s, some of them said I counted by 5s.
So they were recognizing that 4 is 2.
Yeah, but if you, so some of mine, I did something similar,
Yeah.
Amber, and a lot of mine were able to see that it was doubled, but then some said, oh, I skip counted. So then if you ask them, if you skip count, I forget the numbers, but like if it's 5 times 6, if you're skip counting 5 times, what does that, or 6 times, what does that mean? And a lot of them could say, I'm multiplying 5 times 6, you know?
Okay.
Was that your exit ticket from this week or last week? Was that 4s that you just did?
Yeah, it was 2s.
Relating 2s to 4s?
Right. But
Okay,
then-
so then what it sounds like is, because now we have 2 classrooms getting similar responses, sounds like kids are anchoring to skip counting as a strategy to multiply. Right?
Well,
Some kids,
the-
sorry.
No, I was just gonna say the majority could see that. So I did 2 times 8 and 4 times 8,
Okay.
and they could see that you double the 2 to get 4, so you double the 16 to get 32. Most of them could see that. A couple of them still did skip counting, and a few had no idea. But so most.
So
of
there's
them,
your 3 groups for the next day.
exactly, yeah. That's
Right.
what I'm doing.
So then the group that got it moves on to patterns with 2s, 4s, and 8s. And the other 2 groups stick with those 2s and the 4s, and you start exposing them to the 8s also.
Now what I noticed, one of my lower students, like really low, she said the strategy I used is double because it helped me. But she said she used the word double, so I don't know.
Just ask
Does
her,
she
what
really
did she
understand
double?
it?
Say, what
Or-
did you double?
Right.
And why?
So my
Yeah.
kids
That's
used
good.
that answer, but what, and I thought that was proficient. Maybe we didn't talk about what proficient is. Because a lot of my kids said, oh, I just added the number twice. And then when I asked them the question, how does the first multiplication equation help you solve the second one? That was my specific question. And they said they used double. If I saw double in their answer, I was like, he for you.
So, let me ask you guys this question. Potentially, was there a barrier with the written explanation? If we asked them orally that same question, or had her explain it orally, maybe could she explain, or if you asked her a follow-up question,
Right, and I think
right?
like one of my really high students, she said I counted by 5. So I think if I asked more questions and I told her that I was looking for the relationship between going from 2s to 4s, then she would be able to.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. How did you give the assessment? Like, how'd you give that? Did you hand it out to everybody and say, turn this in?
On the board, I
Okay.
wrote if 2 times 10 or 2 times 5 equals 10, then 4 times 5 equals blank, and then the strategy I used was.
Okay, and everybody did it at the same time?
Yeah.
So,
So improved.
You did
and
it, so.
right,
talking through it.
right. So
I
that's
did
the answer, right? That's how you're gonna get a better,
And when you
a
see
truer
that,
response.
you could even hand her a whiteboard and say, show me how you doubled it.
Yeah.
And then she could even write it out or draw it out or whatever, but that you'd get that immediately.
Even like, what do you mean by double? What does that mean?
But that can be also done as a reassessment now too,
Yeah.
so that you can
Yeah.
pull them, as Aaron was saying, like those are your groups for next for tomorrow, but you can also just say, okay, Brianna, come here. And then you have, it shows, okay, here was our understanding, and now here's our understanding, and that in the grade book is good to see.
Yep, because then you have both.
I did a
Right.
different assessment.
Well, so then I thought we were also doing, if they had 4 times,
10 equals
10.
40, so 4 times 13 is
Mhm.
40.
Mhm.
well,
That's what I did.
Okay, well, I was also thinking that if 10, or 4 times 10 equals 40, then 2 times what equals?
Oh.
So, because we were talking about if they can't do their 4s, then they know they can do
Use your
2s
twos.
instead.
Good.
So
But
you
they've
guys
been having a
assessed if
really
they could
hard
use
time.
other facts to solve unknown facts. I assessed if they could use patterns and products of 4 to solve unknown equations with 4. So I assessed a totally different
Oh,
thing.
I see what you're saying.
Because I
You were
assessed
doing
if they
it.
could identify a pattern, and if you know the pattern, and you know 4 times 10 is 40, then figure out what 4 times 13 is using that pattern. You guys said, if you don't know what 4 times 8 is,
Right.
but you know 2 times 8, how can you use 2 times
Yeah.
8 to, so I assessed
Which
a
is
totally
fine,
different thing.
but that's fine. Because now you know what you can go back and assess and teach,
Okay,
and
So
they
I
know
should
what
now
they can
assess
go back,
that.
so that's
Okay.
okay. You kind of went in just a different order of, and really what you're talking about is ways to make them more fluent with all these things. Because
Right.
that's, your assessment is assessing fluency, and so is Amber's assessment, and so is Jared, like, it's all assessing fluency, which patterns is a part of. You just went the other, kind of the other direction.
So do they need to be able to, if it's 4 times 10, do they need to be able to say to solve that I can do 2 times 20 instead?
for which assessment? For the
Just
assessment I did or the
understand
assessment you
putting,
did?
just
So
putting 4s and
relating
2s together.
2s and
Right.
4s? I think they just need to say what you said, that they're understanding if you double your 2 stacks, you get your 4s. Why? Because if you double 2, you get 4.
But I think if they said what you also just said, isn't that?
So
Showing
on
fluency also.
here, it's 2 different answers. So they
Okay.
did 2 times 5 and then 4 times 5.
Okay.
So I'm saying,
Oh, if they got the
to
answer?
get the same answer 4 times 10, how can you get the same answer by multiplying by 2?
So
You
you
don't
want
need
them to
to
go
do
the
that.
opposite direction, so
Right,
what
yeah,
you're really
I'm-
talking about
It's having
is,
4s to get to 2.
right, so you're not doubling the 2s anymore, you're having the 4s,
I
which
thought
is the
that's
same
what we
thing.
were,
Right, that's okay.
Which is
Yeah.
what they want you to get to
Okay,
at the end
yep.
of week 1, so they want you to multiply and divide.
Right.
Yep,
So I think you have to go both
Both
ways.
ways.
okay.
And I think you do that before I would do real fluency between 2s and 4s before you move to 8s.
Right.
right.
Even though, you're still doubling to get the 8th response, I just think that building that, seeing they can work backwards and forwards is really powerful.
And that's true understanding of the relationship between 2s and 4s. Because if you just teach it 4s or 2s doubled, that's half the relationship. Because 2s are also 4s halved.
They're having a really hard
Yeah.
time, so they want to, going from 4 to 2, they half it, put it, make it
Yep,
a half.
yep.
They want to do that with the other number rather than double it.
right.
So they're having a hard time with having that one and then you have to double the other
I
one.
introduced
So that's a
as
specific-
compensation.
That's a specific fluency issue that you know now you can teach in small groups.
Do it with
Right.
actual manipulatives, because they can see if you're having this number,
Right.
then you have to move it over and double this number, because you have to compensate for taking half this number. You have to compensate for that, you have to double this one then. And if you use concrete models, they can actually see how taking half of this, well, you're not getting rid of any of your total is the
Right.
same, so you just have to move them around in the equation.
Right.
Okay.
Something like snack food.
Snap
Mhm.
keys, yeah.
Like-
Or like those
Oh, yeah.
little counters, those circle counters, or
So I have a
if the
question.
numbers aren't too big, I mean.
Right.
I have a question. I gave this to my lower group today who wasn't able to explain the patterns, and they all got this correct. It says 4 friends share the cost of a large pizza at Pizza Galaxy. The total cost is $16. How much money will each friend spend? So they were all able to draw a picture, write the equation, and then write a
Do the
multiplication
division, yeah.
equation. Is that still not proficient because they're not able to explain to me this other stuff?
It's not relating to facts.
Yeah, but
So
So we're
defining
working at the
patterns,
same
that's-
time, we're working on fluency and we're doing word problems.
Right.
They're both
So
in there,
different.
so
Yeah.
that would be a grade for probably the
Solve
word
problems.
problems part.
Is that for
So-
fours?
Because I'm not sure, are they?
Proficiency
That is
for
different.
four
See,
was.
that is, I mean, that is solving problems by applying the
Right.
understanding of multiplication and division
Yeah.
that are related to facts of 4.
Right.
And so what they did is they did what they knew. That strategy is drawing a picture. They broke apart the picture. Here's 4, and then they made a tally. Oh, 16, okay, 4 groups of, and you clearly have taught them that they 4 groups of 4. You know, they understand the arrays and they understand the factors. So I think that's proficient
Mm-hmm.
because that is SLT4 right there. I mean, that is exactly what they're asking for. Now, did they understand the relationship with 2s? They didn't have to. That's not the problem they're asking.
So again, you're assessing something a little different
Okay.
The
with
word
that,
problems,
just
yeah.
with that assessment, which is total
Okay.
Now, what I would say
totally
is if-
confused.
to extend this,
Because we're assessing multiple things, but then we're all saying they're all proficient, so I'm totally
Right,
lost.
it is,
One
because
is
they
because-
are
This
all
was in the-
operations and
Because you-
algebraic
It
thinking.
is, and this is in the
So
curriculum.
every one of
this
my
is-
kids, because they're proficient at this, should have a P in the grade book for this.
But
They
they're
should
not.
have whatever grade they got for relating, using patterns in products of 4 is a grade. They should also get a grade for relating 2s and 4s together. Those are,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
we're talking about 3 separate grades in
Yes.
just 2 weeks?
Yes.
Yes, that's why
Oh,
your grade
my
book should be
goodness.
stacked. So that's why when
But-
we say
But
a
like I do
minimum of
this in
3
small
grades,
group, but this is only, that group did
Right,
this.
That's
so you
fine.
Then
put
I
it
don't
in
have
for that
grades for
group.
all
That's
the
fine.
other kids.
the other kids aren't
But
ready
you
for
will
it.
from small group.
Or they are ready, they're way higher than this, so I,
So
like he, I
their
bet
small
didn't do this for
group-
his higher kids.
Stop for a second though, you're asking a grading question.
Yep.
So if you guys are my small group and I do something with you, I'm putting that grade in for you all. And then I'm gonna go and do small group with somebody else and they're gonna get a different grade because I did something different with them.
But
So
the
they
That's
measurement,
get access for the rest of
differentiation.
them.
but the measurement topic is still algebraic,
Right.
operations,
It's all
algebraic
this-
thinking. It's just that group didn't get that, the same thing because, and it's probably gonna be reflected in your grade book if you're asking a question that's more enriched than that.
And the rest of the students are just having that.
Right.
Sure.
Or
Now,
blank.
Or
which is
right,
really
never
not.
blank.
Yeah.
Now, now, you do want to address it in word problems.
Okay.
So the thing that you want to recognize is that they are different assessments. You guys all gave different assessments, but you have to, and that's something that, I don't know, that happened, you know, but, you do wanna hit the word problems portion of facts with 4s. So if you haven't done that, that's something you wanna do. Now, I think when we leave here, we should talk about what because again, like, I don't know how it's, because I think we went away with just the doubling, but like, that is a grade, and I would put that in the grade book. Cause you wanna record as much as you can in, you know, showing evidence is great for student learning. You know, how you're planning and all that, so, but you do wanna if you had one common formative, that's great to talk about, but you're all different people and you all have different students, and it's okay to kind of like, I'm gonna need to go this way and Jared's going this way, and but you're all talking about 4s, you're all talking about the understandings of 2s and 4s, and it just, it's gonna show up in different ways. Having one is great, but yeah, if you get 3 grades a week, that's good. Because you should be assessing every day, that's what, you know, formative assessment, it informs the instruction. So you're giving something every day. You don't have to put it in your grade book, or you can, because it shows learning.
Right. It also doesn't have to be a piece of paper,
Right, okay.
right? Just keep thinking about that.
So, but then there should also be a 4th grade with them, going from the 4s to 2s, going the other way.
Well, I would argue just saying, like, you may wanna grade your exit card and put that in the grade book, if you feel like that's a true representation of something that the kids know. You may have some kids that you need to go back, like this, I don't forget her name, but
Yeah.
go back and probe, reassess, whatever, a little bit to make sure she has a good understanding. Like you were saying, like, every time the kids wrote double, you're like, great, but now you're thinking maybe like, okay, maybe that wasn't, I need more, that's fine, you go back, you get more. But remember that true fluency piece, that relationship, is 2s to 4s and 4s to 2s. So it may show up as 2 different grades in your grade book, but that's really one lack of a better word, skill that you're measuring. Does that make sense? So going forward, you may want to consider having an assessment that gives you that information together.
And I think, Jared, you could even take your assessment right there with fours and say, you know, what if only 2 friends were sharing the cost of that pizza?
Right.
What would that look like?
Okay.
And then they're gonna show, they're gonna know, okay, well, that's 2 friends, then the cost stays the same, but now it gets to the half. What's half of 16 was 8. So then you're getting that, so now you're touching on that just with just a verbal question you can ask in a small group. Now, not everybody's ready for that question.
Yeah.
But, you know, or maybe they are, maybe you'll show, maybe those kids, I bet you could draw it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
And
that's
that's
something you
proficient.
definitely wanna do in small group, because you wanna be able to watch what they do and ask them questions.
And when, I don't know who the kid is, but when Sophia says, oh, well that means that I'm gonna have to pay more money. And then you go, well, how do you know that? Well, because before I only had to pay $4 because there was 4 of us spending the money, but now that there's only 2 of us, I'm gonna get more pizza, but I'm gonna have to pay more money for it. I mean, like, that's
big.
bam. I mean, that's, and then she didn't write anything down. Jared's literally typing in his grade book right there, or on a sticky note, Sophia, P, and then he goes later and makes it look pretty in the grade book. And that's it.
So when do we move on to 8s? And I know that, I know once students are proficient, but I'm just thinking about like our timeline right now. You know, we talked about moving on to 8s, but do we need to back up and stop and make sure students are fluid in 2s and 4s for a little while longer before we move on to 8s?
Let me just tell you where we're going after 8s. We're going to 9s and relating 9's facts with 10's facts. So
Okay.
9 times 3 equals what? I know that 10 times 3 equals 30, so then 9 is 1 less than 10, so I have to subtract 3.
Great.
Because I have 3 9s.
Right. So what?
That's where we're going after.
Well, and along with Lauren's
Wow.
question, homework has to be homogeneous across all the teams, but Amber, Lauren and I noticed last Friday, their kids weren't ready for 8s, but mine were. So then, and so we did 2 pages of 8s in homework and 2 pages of 4s. The day my kids did the first 4 pages, or the first 4 facts, they came back to school and said, why did we do 4s again? That was way too easy. So I'm wondering now, I'm changing my math to slow down for other classes with my classes.
So was it? Let me ask you this question: was it easy because they've memorized their 4 facts, or was it easy
Because I think we've
because-
already figured out all the patterns, we've applied those patterns, we've related them to 2s, and so they're like, well, why are we doing this again? I wanted to work with 8s because they just got introduced to that pattern. They hadn't applied that pattern yet. So they wanted to, I think, practice 8s more because
Right.
they have already applied what they knew about 4s and 2s.
Are you guys still putting in that kind of enriched challenge problem at the end?
There's some of them also solved that in a day.
Okay.
So Lauren, I want you to answer your own question.
I don't know. I think that we need to move on to 8s once kids are fluid in 2s and 4s.
Okay.
Like, once they have a deep understanding, like you were sharing your example, if you know, was it 2 times 5, then what's 4 times 5? Like, once kids can do that and they can think and explain it, or even the example that you gave with dividing the pizza, I think it was 16 slices, 4 friends, and then if you said, okay, now if you have 2 friends, once they've got that, then I'm willing to take off and go to 8s. But I guess I just keep thinking of the timeline, like the learning versus our timeline, and making sure that we cover everything that we need to cover.
But I do think though, if they get the 2s to 4s, that they really get it, really understand it, that'll make the 8s easier.
It does, yeah. And if you go through and look at all the patterns you did with 2s and 4s, and then 8s have a lot of commonalities too, then they start to see like,
Yeah.
if I know my 2s, I can know my 4s, and I
So
can
you
also know
might
my
spend
8s.
more time on the front end of it and less time on the back end of it because they have a true understanding of what they're doing when they get to 8s. And the 9s and 10s is slightly more complicated.
Right,
I mean,
because
I
the
think
9s and
that
10s
works.
takes it kind of to another level.
Yeah.
Because that's a true, like, I mean, like, that's like number sense,
Right. I was
big
thinking
time,
they would
where 2s,
do
4s, and 8s is
like
more like,
3s
okay,
and
I have things I
6s.
can figure out here. More patterny. 9s and 10s, you're not necessarily going to do a lot of patterns. It's going to be a lot of like process and strategy and partial product stuff. Like, that's when it gets to like a different, like, kind of steps their game up a little
Right.
bit with multiplication. So
Yeah.
I would argue that we really want to solidify the 2s, 4s, and 8s, and they might be there. I mean,
Oh,
based on what
they've
you're saying,
got- yeah,
we're at least
they've
getting really
got
close.
it. Yeah, and then
You
today
know.
I introduced 8s, and then the kids had to identify patterns of 8s, and I mean they were like, "Oh,
That's
look,
good.
look at the ones, and it's just
Well,
like."
we heard you.
They're excited.
They were excited. They were excited.
And something you could do, you know, I went and watched Kurt teach a little bit yesterday, and they were talking about multiples of 3 and looking for patterns, and the whole lesson was about divisibility rules. What you could do as like a summative, let me like check in with everybody with my 2s and my 4s, is kind of like just on a big whiteboard on your table, or just right on your table, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, all the way up to like, 40 or something, and just say, okay, like, you all get a different color crayon or marker, and like, let's just talk about all the stuff that you know about all these numbers. And like, you want to hear for the things that, well, I know that 4 is 8, 4, 8, 12, okay, that's all like related, because 8 is 2 4s, and 12 is 3 4s, but then like, like, and then you can kind of assess them, yeah, they're ready. Or, here's Jared sitting there saying absolutely nothing, and you're asking him, he's not there, he's not ready. But the other 5 kids in the group are ready for 8s. There may just be, like, what I'm saying is we don't want to leave a couple behind, because we're saying in general, they're all ready.
Well, we don't, but then I guess that goes back to Aaron's question about the homework. Because I know, like, that's what we did. We said, okay, you're going to do 2 pages of 4s, we're going to do 2 pages of 8s, we're going to make sure that we teach 8s by today.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I was a little
So-
stressed so I started 8s, and some of my students weren't ready.
But also, if some of your students are ready, you should not do the whole group 8s. You should be doing small group 4s with those who aren't ready, but introduce the 8s.
Right,
Because
and
some of them
with
are
my
ready.
groups that have already gotten it, we were getting into more word problems and stuff in small
Yeah.
groups. And the other ones were.
So- I'm not really
So the
sure
homework's a
about
little
homework.
tricky. I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's
may
a
get to the
big
point
challenge.
where you have to differentiate it a little bit for a few kids. And it might be the kids that we don't want to leave behind. We're not going to throw them into 8s yet for homework, because if they can't do it at home on their own, what's the point of even giving them that paper? So maybe they just need, and I mean, literally I'd take a Sharpie on their homework and say, bring me your homework packet. I'm changing this real quick, and giving them something quickly different. And again, if we're only talking about maybe 4 kids, right? I mean, I know that's extra time to do that, but that's what we have to do in order to differentiate the homework a little bit and not overhaul, oh my gosh, we have to make 100 copies of this paper because it's not right for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I don't think any parent would have a problem with that. You know what I mean? Like, if a parent calls in and says, well, how come my kid's not working on 8s? Like, well, because I have all this data to show you that they're not ready for 8s, so they're getting more practice with 4s.
And honestly, when it comes to homework, that's not the kind of thing that parents call about. Parents call because they're like, Miss Sherwood has assigned 4 hours of homework, but my neighbor's child in Miss Newman's class has 2 problems.
Right.
That's what parents call
Right.
about. They don't call about how come this one has this and
Right.
this one has 4s and this one has 8s. So,
That did happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the parents were wondering why they had different.
No,
Because
no,
they're two
that wasn't
different
it. It was
kids.
the mom was concerned about one student was doing homework at school and the other student.
yeah,
And
see,
yeah,
it's
so it was
not,
it
it's
wasn't the
usually not about
packet,
the
it
homework
was
itself
about-
being different. It's about volume
Yeah.
or like, how come
Process.
you never have homework and
Right.
you always have
Right.
homework?
Yes, and it was
That's
difficult
when, as
for her
a
to
parent,
sit the
you're
kids
like,
down.
what is happening?
Or if
Yeah.
it's content different, like if you
Right.
were to move into 9s and,
Yeah,
eight-
you're doing
I
9s and
think
10s right now and you're
she's
doing
on
2s,
twos.
I'd be a little like,
So what if at one point, because what's coming next is 9, so what if her kids are then still on 8s, but I am ready for 9s?
That's not that different
Right.
though, and you have data.
Right, you
But
have to
going
get
Twos
it.
from
and nines are
8
different.
Going from 8s to 9s is different because it's not the doubling anymore, it's the
Totally.
Right.
10s and 9s. So we wouldn't be able, if, like, because we are still doing 2s and 4s, say, we wouldn't be able to give the students a page with
9s.
relating
We haven't
9s and
talked about
10s
it.
because we haven't even taught that. And they wouldn't
Yeah,
understand
we're
it
not,
because it's not
'cause-
So
doubling.
the other
Next
the other
week
thing
we're
I would
still
say to
doing
parents
8s.
is like homework is supposed to be reinforcing what they already know. Right? Like it's not new learning. They should not be learning something at home. They should be practicing something that they already know.
So then is it okay for
So then, like-
Aaron's class to do something they learned?
So like
I'm just
Refresh
thinking
themselves
I
on
about,
what they
I
learned
wouldn't give
before?
them like a million 2s if they're ready for 8s, but I wouldn't, like as long as it was a meaningful problem and not just like a list of like this times this equals this.
right, like applying what they.
Right, like if you're
learned.
giving them like a word problem that has to do with 4s, great.
I would rather see one problem like Jared's than 6 problems that just say 2 times 4,
Right.
2 times 8, 2 times 9.
Well, what if my word problem was relating 9s and like they're using, so after Thanksgiving break, my kids will be ready to talk about the relationship between 9s and 10s facts. But what if they're still talking about the relationship between 2s, 4s, and 8s? They're totally different.
But we're
And
not
my-
talking about your whole class is doing 9s and 10s and her whole class is doing 2s, 4s, and 8s. We're talking about a subset of kids in her class that's talking about 2s, 4s, and 8s.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I
You
have
see the
a,
difference? Like as a
group of
parent, I
kids
would be
that-
very concerned if I saw that one whole class is doing something way low and another whole class is doing something way high. Because my concern would then be,
My kid's in the low.
why is this class so low?
Well, I definitely understand that,
Yeah.
but my understanding was that they were slowing down the whole group lessons, that
Well,
you were.
I think
no,
the
as
conversation was like, do we need to look and make sure they're fluent?
Right.
I think that was the thing that
Yeah.
Amber said, do we need to look and make sure, do they know them both ways?
Mhm.
Do they know them with missing factors? Do they know them with missing products? Do they know, like, so can they relate, like if you say 2 times blank is, 24, and then blank times 4 is, 24, do they understand how that's gonna relate in that way? I think that's what I was hearing
Right,
her
yeah.
say. And I think it is a subset, like even I think, or probably some of your kids could benefit.
They're
And it
still
goes
working
back
on
to
that,
what
right.
Aaron was saying, like, it's also like, homework shouldn't be new learning, so there are gonna be 2s in there. There are gonna, okay, so there's a couple 8s. It shouldn't be all 8s and 9s and 10s. It should be a process, because you wanna continue reinforcing the old skills also. So I would say having 2s, having 4s, having 8s. No, now there's like a couple problems with 8s and 10s, which actually goes to what your assessment was on, which was an adding on anyways, which
Right.
is, if they start at like, if 4 times 10 is 40, what's 13 times 4? They're adding on, 12. Well, they're adding on 4 plus 4 plus 4, which if you're doing the 10s and 8s, you're also subtracting. Oh, well, here's this problem I just gave you. Relate this to this understanding
Right,
of 9s and 10s,
right.
which is 4s.
Yeah.
So you can give a problem of 2s, 4s, or 8s with that adding on. If you know what 8 times 5 is, oh, it's 40. What's 8 times 7? That's
And
16.
just because you're teaching 9s and 10s related to one another in the way that the curriculum says, doesn't mean that a child might not see a 10 as 4, 4, and 2.
Right.
Or 2
And be able to
5s.
solve it very easily that way,
Right.
because they know all the other things. So just because they're not showing it specifically the way you taught it, or they're not picking up on it right away specifically the way you're showing it, doesn't mean that that problem is inaccessible to them. That's their challenge problem on that homework.
So
they
if
can
I
see
start
it.
9s and 10s and we talk about that relationship in the whole group, and they understand that they can just take away one group because 10 is one more than 9, that can be in the homework even though they haven't introduced the relationship of 10s and 9s.
Well, now, I would think they would have needed to introduce it at least, but I think you're thinking of classes as whole, everybody